What's going on, guys? PC here, and welcome to another episode of I'm Talking. Today I wanted to talk about something that's a bit of a quote-unquote hot topic when it comes to this generation of consoles. With the exception of the Nintendo Wii, this current generation is definitely not what I would consider to be reliable, especially when it comes to the Xbox 360 and the first iteration of that, which was very prone to overheating and the red ring of death due to mainly design problems. They just did not design the console to vent heat very well, and the same with the PS3 to an extent. It's not actually that much better with its yellow light of death. And this is a shame because it seems that when it comes to Microsoft and Sony, making their consoles reliable with a low failure rate is not high on their priority list, which it should be because people pay a lot of money for these consoles and they should expect them to last a long time and not just a few years. And when you think about it, this generation is the first generation that has really had issues with console failure rates. If you think back to any generation before this, nobody really worried about their consoles breaking down after a few years. And this generation, it's pretty much expected to happen at some point, which is not good. Uh, I mean, especially when you think back to the 8 and 16-bit eras of consoles with the Super Nintendo, the NES, the Genesis, the Master System. Look how many of those consoles are still out there and working perfectly. And after 20 plus years, and you see the PS3 and the 360, you're lucky if they last a few years. And this is just not acceptable in my opinion. Game consoles should not have an expiration date. Now, many of you may be thinking that, well, this generation has more advanced CPUs, which produce more heat, so naturally they're going to break down more because of overheating, right? Well, that's true, but there's no excuse for it still because they should be able to counteract that. If you implement proper cooling into your game console, this should not happen. I mean, look at PCs. They have the same advanced CPUs in them, but they don't overheat all the time. That's because proper cooling was implemented. So let me kind of put this in perspective a bit here. Back in February of this year, I did some research on eBay, of all places, to figure out, just out of curiosity, what percentage of used game consoles being sold on eBay were broken versus working. And I found some really interesting statistics here. Now, obviously, these aren't going to be perfect because, well, there's no scientific basis behind them and they're from eBay. But if you ask just about anyone to rank consoles based on their reliability, you'll probably get a list very close to this. And it's surprising how accurate that this came out. So at the top of the list, unsurprisingly, we have the Xbox 360, which came in at 46%. 46% of Xbox 360s, used Xbox 360s being sold on eBay are broken. If this is anything to go by, we're talking about a 50% failure rate. That is just unbelievable. How anyone could make a game console that's so unreliable is beyond me. And like I said, the PlayStation 3 is actually not that much better. And it comes in at 35%, which is still a good percentage better, but still in that unacceptable range, I think. Now, as we continue down the list here, you're going to start to see how much of a leap this generation took in terms of console failure rates. So right below the PlayStation 3, we have the Xbox at 25%, which I still think is in that unacceptable range. In my opinion, it should be down towards probably around 15%. But the Xbox obviously is at 25%. It's not very good. And this kind of points towards Microsoft as not making very reliable hardware, at least in the game console area. So below the Xbox, we have the PlayStation at 17%, which is not bad. That's probably about where it should be. The Dreamcast, 15%. The Saturn and the Genesis both tied at 14%. The PlayStation 2 at 13%. And here's where things start to get interesting. As you may have noticed, I have yet to actually mention a Nintendo console. And that's because every Nintendo console is down at the bottom of the list, having the best reliability of all the consoles that I researched here. And that says something. That says that Nintendo ranks console reliability at the top of their priority list, which is where it should be. So as we continue down the list here, we have the GameCube at 11%, and below that we actually have the Nintendo Wii at only 8%, which means Nintendo actually improved the reliability of their console this generation, which just goes to show you that Nintendo actually prides itself on making a good, reliable console. And it's actually tied with the NES at 8%. So the Wii is just as reliable as the NES. That is really good, and kudos to Nintendo for keeping up this trend of making reliable, well-built consoles. And below that, we have the Super Nintendo at 7%, and below that, we have the most reliable console on my list, the Nintendo 64, at only 4%. And that's kind of funny because I actually did a video on my other channel a while back, which was called Box O Broken Nintendo 64 Consoles. And what I did was I actually bought a lot of, I think it was 12 Nintendo 64s that were supposedly all broken. But in that video, you'll see that I actually went through each one of them, testing them, and they actually all worked. The problem with them was they were just all missing the jumper packs, which if you don't know is basically just a RAM placeholder, and it needs to be in the console for it to function properly. And once I actually put a jumper pack in each one of these, they all worked. Or at least most of them. A couple of them had separate issues, but they were easily fixed, and I didn't even have to open up the consoles. So it just goes to show you, yeah, they are quite reliable, and it's not surprising that it is the #1 most reliable console on this list. But anyway, you can kind of see now how much of a leap this generation took in terms of console failure rates. It's not good, and hopefully it won't continue into the next generation. I hope Microsoft and Sony will have learned from this generation and kind of turn things around, but I wouldn't really hold my breath on it. It's pretty sad when you think about it that in 20 years' time, there'll probably be more working Super Nintendos out there than Xbox 360s and PS3s. And that's just crazy when you think about it, but that's just the way it's going to be. And like I said, hopefully they will turn it around this next generation with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, but who knows. But anyway, guys, that's just my 2 cents on the subject. What do you guys think? Are you okay with paying $400 or $500 for a game console just to have it break down a few years down the road? I personally don't think that's acceptable, and I don't think you should think it's acceptable either. But anyway, just give me your 2 cents in the comments below, and if you want to make a video response, you can do that as well. Unfortunately, YouTube has discontinued the video response feature, but if you want to make one anyway, just send me a link and I will post it in the description below. But anyway, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, as usual, please comment, rate, subscribe, and thanks for watching.